There we go. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, back to the Unlimited YouTube channel. Time for part two of myself and Brett Lickey's preview of the NHL for this upcoming season. Last night, if you watched, and if not, it's just right there on the YouTube channel, right next to this video. We previewed the Western Conference. Got to look at some good teams out there. But now we turn our attention to the Eastern Conference. Now, moving on to my side of the continent, because you're up there in Canada, so it's a
Up
little bit of
there
a
and to the
difference.
west.
Up to the west. Is it Pacific
Far.
time?
Mountain time. So same time as
Mountain time.
Denver. For the Americans, it's the same time as Denver.
Right. And we have a mission that we're going to end this by about 9 o'clock Eastern because Brett, who is covering the Oilers again, has to not only cover the Oilers game tonight, but has to do it from his laptop because this game is not being televised.
Yeah, they don't listen. In Edmonton, Oilers are everything. So why the hell they're not televising on one of the 5 or 6 Sportsnet channels we have up here, Oilers preseason games, even the last 3, it blows my mind. But
It's not
whatever.
even on NHL Network or anything?
No, and we don't have so what I have to do is I have to go on their Facebook channel because the Oilers website blacks me out, even though I'm in Edmonton. So I have to go
Same
to
thing
their
happened with the Flyers website.
see, it's the NHL needs to get their stuff together. This could be a whole other
Yeah.
podcast, but
Mm-hmm.
I go to their Facebook page, I watch it live. Not the worst thing in the world. I know it's preseason. Other people be like, why do you even care?
Hey, you got a
Edmonton.
job to do, man.
Got a job to do. And I want to watch, there's
Oh,
still
yeah, of
some
course.
roles to be fought for on this team. I'm very excited.
I've been making sure to watch as much of the Flyers preseason I can. So, but we'll get to that in a little bit. So let's dive right in so we could try to hit that goal. We've got about 40 minutes, should be plenty of time. So since we started last night, well, kind of started with the defending Western Conference champions, let's fill out the other half of that equation and talk about the two-time defending Stanley Cup champions. La da 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 da. Sorry, I'm a Flyers fan. I'm going to be bitter. The Pittsburgh Penguins. And hey, give them credit. They repeated as champions, so it hasn't been done the salary cap era. I can't really say much about that for all the Penguins fans watching. However, I am a little curious about some moves they made this offseason. Some were kind of inevitable. Marc-Andre Fleury going to the Vegas Golden Knights in the expansion draft. But there are some other pieces leaving, like specifically like Nick Bonino and someone else whose name is escaping me, leaving this Pens team. That's very interesting. And how do the Pens fill in that gap? Well, they traded their first round pick for Trevor Lewis. And the reasoning for that, at least by Penguins fans' rationale, is, oh, we're tired of the league like trying to force us to play by its standards, so now we're gonna play by its way. I'm like, but 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 you just won 2 cups. Like, what are you mad about? So, oh, we need goon Trevor Lewis to um, help contend with the other team's tough guys. That seems insane to me. Look, the Penguins are still going to be good. You still have Crosby, one of the top players in the NHL for obvious reasons. You still have Phil Kessel, Evgeny Malkin, who was a beast last postseason, and Matt Murray, who just finished his rookie year last year and still has 2 cups already to his name. So it'll be interesting to see, can the Pens make it a three-peat?
The Penguins, yeah, this team it's almost amazing how their talent just keeps on coming up. I mean, yeah, you've got Crosby, yeah, you've got Malkin, yeah, you've got Letang, but they've got so many quality young guys. Like you mentioned, Matt Murray. This guy comes in his rookie year, wins a cup, wins another one.
Yeah, that wasn't even technically his rookie year the first time. Last
Yeah,
year was his rookie season.
it's almost it makes you wonder. And then you got a guy like Jake Guentzel who emerges. They
Couldn't miss. He couldn't miss in the playoffs.
I mean, the way they find talent, I mean, they just emerge out of seemingly nowhere. I mean, if you're on the Penguins beat, obviously you got a an eye for that. But hey, they're a talented squad. And last year they won another cup without Chris Letang, which I don't know how many teams could lose their absolute number one defenseman who munches up close to 30 minutes a night, especially in the playoffs, and still win a cup. It speaks to their insane depth. Last year, 50-win season. I see no reason at all to think why they can't do that again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's funny because like both times they were able to go all the way to the cup these past couple years, they weren't like the towering number one seed. They were a little lower, like they were somewhat of a top seed, but they found a way. And like you said, that speaks to depth. It speaks to head coach Mike Sullivan, who we brought up, I believe, last night. Mm-hmm. Oh, and before I continue, I made a mishap. It's Ryan Reeves, not Trevor Reeves. So 1,000 pardons to Trevor. But nonetheless, my point remains the same about, we need to trade a first-round pick for this guy. And anyway, but the point is, like, the Penguins, they don't have to be a number one seed to be dangerous. They just find a way. Like, and they have a roster full of guys who have been there and done that. I mean, Sidney Crosby, love or hate the guy, he's got 3 cups to his name, and that's for good reason. It's just the fact that as good as he is, he can find that other level in the postseason. I don't think he deserved his past couple Conn Smythes. I think the first year it should have been Kessel, and last year it should have been Malkin. Mm-hmm. But you understand why that guy gets as much play as he gets because, yeah, again, whether you love or hate him, when he steps on the ice, he's more than likely the most talented guy there.
Exactly. And with Crosby, I mean, it's easy to look, he's had some playoff years where his point totals or his goal scoring totals aren't off the charts. But like you said, this guy, true definition of a leader. In the playoffs, you will never, ever, ever see him half hustle or half-heartedly get off to the bench for a change or sort of, come back. That guy is on at all times. It's what makes the Penguins so dangerous. And Evgeny Malkin, who was put as 100 and whatever, he was left off the top 100 NHL players list, which is insane to me, but whatever. Evgeny Malkin, when you've got those two as your top 2 centermen, you're going to win a lot of hockey games. And you're going to win a lot of hockey games in the playoffs because they're the exact type of playoff type performers who are capable. And like you said, they're not always in the regular season. It's not like they didn't beat the Capitals last year in the standings, but they have a roster that's just built to withstand and endure the craziness of the NHL playoffs, which is a big, big factor. You have to have a roster that can survive it. They have it.
Mm-hmm. And speaking of the Washington Capitals, let's just move right along to them because, hey, this is a team that's won the President's Trophy a couple times. This is a team that's been the number 1 seed in the Eastern Conference and hasn't reached the conference finals. Lots of question marks about this team this year, and it has to be because a lot of people, including myself, are viewing this as really the final year for this team to do this because, I mean, you knew you were going to lose Kevin Shattenkirk. They weren't going to be able to afford him in free agency. He was a rental when they got him at the trade deadline. He goes off to New York. But, I mean, a questionable decision to sign. I get re-signing TJ Oshie, and, of course, Justin Williams left as well. And, like I said, I get re-signing TJ Oshie. But to, what was it, an 8-year deal when he's, like 34, 35?
No, he's only 30, actually. He seems older because he's been around forever. But but he'll be 31 this season. His birthday's in December, so he'll be 31 this season.
But the point remains the same. That's a long contract for someone who's already past age 30. Look, and I get it, TJ Oshie, still a great hockey player. Obviously, for Americans, everyone's going to remember that amazing shootout performance against Russia. That's going to stand out every time you think of TJ Oshie. But that's tying up a lot of money for a guy who's already past year 30. And this team, they're still stacked. Yeah, they lose a couple pieces. They don't have Brooks anymore, but you still have another one of the best players in the world in Alexander Ovechkin, who many don't even think is human because he's just so talented, especially in the offensive zone. But if they don't win the cup this year or they don't even really sniff it, talks have to start about at least trying to talk him into moving, right?
Well, typically you wouldn't think that with a superstar of his caliber, but I, what else do you do? Like I said, if they don't win again, what else do you do? Uh, you've tried everything you can to bring a Stanley Cup to Washington. You've tried absolutely everything, short of, I don't know. Like, well, last year that was their big move. Absolute giants in the regular season, 118-point season, 55 wins. They kill it. Then they bring in Kevin Shattenkirk at the trade deadline, which you could make your argument if that was good or bad, if perhaps maybe adding someone of that caliber to a team that was already really terrific, maybe it disrupted the chemistry, whatever. They took a swing for the fences and they failed. If they don't, and I don't know exactly how they're going to play off this year, they'll still be damn good. They'll still be near the top in the Eastern Conference, but if they don't win it this year, I don't know. I agree with you, Harper. I think it might be time to look into possibly moving on from Alex Ovechkin. Now, the owner, I believe, is very close with Ovechkin. So does he allow a move like that to happen? Who knows? Does Ovechkin even allow?
Yeah, I don't know if he has any kind of non-movement clause. I would assume so because they're paying him like so. I don't know the number, but just an astronomical amount of money, and rightfully so. He's one of the best players in the world. He deserves every penny he makes. But I mean, I believe the word we used when we were doing our playoff previews and stuff is it's just mystifying that it doesn't matter who coaches this team. It doesn't matter how good the goalie is. It doesn't matter how good the weapons are up front and in the back and how many faces change. For whatever reason, the Washington Capitals, kind of like the Washington Nationals in baseball, can't get over the hump.
You know, some teams just have that issue. I think of this Washington Capitals team almost reminds me of the San Jose Sharks from probably 2006 or so to like right up until these last few years where they get into the playoffs. At the beginning of the season, everyone's pegging them to be a favorite. They deliver in the regular season, and then they get into the playoffs, and it's like they get a disappointing performance from their goalie, or they're, when Ovechkin doesn't, click at the rate you want. Holtby was a little disappointing last year as well, especially in that Pittsburgh series. So I don't know, but I think I remember when we did the playoff preview predictions for last year, and we asked each other, we said, well, what the heck do they do if they don't at least make it to the Cup final? And then they didn't make it to the Cup final. And I'm still sitting here going, I have no idea what they do. Your guess is like, what else do you do?
And nor should we really, because again, like, I mean, it seems silly to just say, oh, just trade Ovechkin. But I mean, like, what else can you do? And it's a shame because it's not all on Alex Ovechkin. This isn't us saying like, oh, like he's the reason they're not moving on. No, he's again one of the top, probably 2 or 3 players in the league, and rightfully so. So we're not saying, oh, it's his fault, but sometimes you gotta do something to just shake everything up. And like, you can't just fire Barry Trotz. They fired coaches before. They've faced that problem, and it doesn't change anything.
Yeah, it just seems like it's cyclical, and you know what? Even at this point, maybe it even could be mental, where they get into the playoffs and that seed of doubt's there, and sometimes that, especially having played hockey, that it might not seem like anything, but if you have, especially in a long playoff series, you have that little inkling of doubt when you enter the game of, well, maybe we can't do it. Now, these are professionals, but hey, mentality affects everyone. That could be enough, just that little bit, to maybe where that little bit of doubt hesitates you just a little bit, and that's a lost puck battle. Or that's not quite as much of a zip on a shot. And in a playoff series, if it comes down to a goal in this game or that game or an overtime game, that could be enough. Who knows? But at this point, what else could it be? It's not the roster configuration. They had definitely a good enough roster last year. That's why I'm looking at either A, they're cursed, which who knows, maybe that's the case, or it's a mentality thing.
I mean, and obviously we still have a whole regular season to get to before playoffs really pick up in intensity, all that talk. But it's still worth noting that, like, expectations yet again are going to be high for the Washington Capitals, both from their fans and from the eyes of the media and everybody else. So let's keep an eye on the Capitals. But now we move on to a team that actually faced the Capitals in the first round and really kind of took the Caps to their limit, turned a lot of heads with their young talent, and that's the Toronto Maple Leafs. I don't know if there's going to be a more fun team to watch this year in terms of just pure skill and just they're just going to be entertaining. I mean, when you have guys like Austin Matthews, guys like Mitch Marner, guys like Will Nylander, coupled with guys who have been there, like you just have all this pure young talent. You have the coach, Frederick Anderson, I know a decent goalie helped them out some games last year, but I mean the big three I just mentioned, the three rookies who really took the NHL by storm last year. I mean, of course, Austin Matthews, you got to remember, he scored 4 goals on his first NHL game.
Yeah.
So right away, oh, hi, there's that white hot spotlight. And obviously, he's the one who's going to get a lot of the attention. But again, the other two as well, with those 3 rookies up front leading the way, coupled with the rest of this team, if they can have their act together, yeah, they might be the most entertaining team to watch on ice this year.
Yeah, the Maple Leafs, they are certainly up here in Canada, they are getting a ton of talk because the Maple Leafs are the center of the hockey universe in terms of our sports media up here. TSN, Sportsnet, both based out of Toronto. That's all you hear about. So, but deservedly so. Last year was one of the best years in a long time to be a Toronto Maple Leafs fan. After so many disappointing years, they haven't won a cup since 67. They finally have this young, abundant roster. Austin Matthews looks incredible, and Mitch Marner and Nylander, Mitch Marner was fantastic last year as well. So a lot of talent, a lot of skill. My biggest question with the Maple Leafs comes from their back end. Morgan Riley's still there, and he's sort of the I guess you could say go-to guy on that defense core, and they'll look for him to sort of improve on his play last year and continue to grow and develop. But the thing to keep in mind with the Maple Leafs last year, and you did mention that they did get into the playoffs, they faced the Capitals, almost beat the Capitals, remarkably so. They put up. Everyone thought they'd be rolled over, they weren't. The thing I look at though is I wonder a couple things. Sophomore slumps. I don't think it'll happen to Austin Matthews. I think he's too good for it to happen to him. But I wonder about a guy like Nylander, and I wonder about a guy like Mitch Marner. If we do see a little bit of now they're in the show, maybe they take a little bit of it for granted, and we see a little bit of a reduction. Sophomore slumps just happen to be a thing. And the other thing that I do wonder about is last year they made the playoffs by 1 point. Just by 1. They had the Lightning knocking right on the door. They had the Islanders knocking right on their door. And even the Flyers, I mean, they were a few points back, but they were still in that ballpark. If the Flyers would have had a couple more breaks down the latter part of the season, they would have been right there too. So, and then you got improving teams like the Hurricanes, who look very pegged to have a very good year. And so the Maple Leafs are going to have a tough year in that Eastern Conference because, well, like I said, they're going to have to compete with a Lightning team that's better, all these other teams that are better, and not a lot of teams at the top that will necessarily falter. The Senators probably drop off, but I don't know. It's going to be an interesting year for Toronto. I know there's a lot of media hype and a lot of high expectations, but I think it's important to caution and remember that, they only made it by 1 point last year, and that's a win. And also important, they got a lot of points last year. They got 15 points from overtime. So a lot of their games are going to overtime. And, those tie games that go into overtime, I mean, it gets you that extra point, but it doesn't always break out that way. And that could have been a difference. So I'm excited to watch that team, but I'm cautioned.
And that is a fair statement because while all that exciting youth was entertaining in their first year in NHL, you're right. Some guys do hit sophomore slumps, and that's in all sports. And even if you're like a top like superstar young talent, you can hit somewhat of a sophomore slump.
Mm-hmm.
Know what I mean? Like
Exactly.
it's so. But again, I think they're still going to deliver some highlight reel moments that you're going to want to set your DVR for TSN or Sports Center here in the U.S. or whatever to be like, oh, like it's amazing that actually happened, and
Certainly,
I'm
and
curious to see for this Leafs team.
even in the preseason, Austin Matthews, he's been lighting it up. I kind of scroll through my timeline and see. So exciting squad. And they were very exciting even in the playoffs. I think we even mentioned that last year. So one of those teams that, yeah, maybe they do fall out of the playoffs. Maybe they're right there, but they're going to be must-see television. Probably quite a few 6-5 or 5-4 games, especially if the refs keep calling these penalties. This team is going to be electric on the power play.
Yeah, that's a good point. So now let's move on from Toronto back stateside to another team that made the playoffs and lost in the first round to the eventual Stanley Cup champion Pittsburgh Penguins, the Columbus Blue Jackets, who we alluded to it a little last night, but of course the big thing that happened to them this offseason is, oh hey, the Blackhawks missed Andrew Saad, or Brandon Saad, excuse me. So, oh hey, here's Artemi Panarin, one of the hottest young players in our sport or today. Here you go. So, uh, obviously that's a huge deal for a Columbus team that's already pretty good. You got guys like Cam Atkinson. You have Seth Jones, who's finding his way on the blue line. And of course, in the net, two-time Vezina winner Sergei Bobrovsky, just still doing his thing somehow, some way. So it'll be interesting to see how Panarin fits into this puzzle, because on one hand, people can think, oh, he's been doing well these past years. What's really going to change? He could do well. But on the other hand, I mean, keep in mind, a lot of his time in Chicago, he was playing with either Patrick Kane and or Jonathan Toews. So, Brett, how do you think Panarin's going to fit in? Do you think he's going to stand out on his own away from Toews and Kane? Or does he maybe stumble a little bit?
Well, he's going to have some talent that he can play with. They've got Zach Werenski on the back end, who on the power plays good. I think that power play with Werenski and Panarin and Wenberg, they've got some good, strong pieces there that should be quite offensive, should get them a few goals. But Patrick Kane is one of the top 5 players in the NHL today. And so getting to play beside that, you do, like you said, you have to sit there and pause and wonder, well, how much of that effect is Patrick Kane? Do I think Panarin's going to go to Columbus and all of a sudden be just a slouch and, not look any good? No, I don't think so. He's a very smart player, very skilled player. He goes to the right places. I think he has the ability. I think he made Patrick Kane better, as well as Patrick Kane making him better. I think they were such a good duo. So I think he's going to fit in, and he'll come in there. You got Cam Atkinson on that team as well, who's very skilled. So I think he'll do all right. I think this Columbus Blue Jackets team should actually be better. I think that trade should make them better. Like you mentioned, they got Seth Jones back there as well, who is an awesome young defenseman, traded for Ryan Johansson, but good move.
Yeah, you talk about a trade that worked out on both ends.
Really, it really did. And Seth Jones was very promising in Nashville. They had an abundance of D. He came to Columbus, and he's really helped stabilize that blue line. And then Bobrovsky. I mean, if he has a year like he did last year, which is very, very possible, this team could accomplish even better. And that's really saying something, considering that most people picked them to finish last year.
Yeah, it's really interesting how people can all think one thing and then they just kind of turn it around. And I mean, they last year, I remember when we previewed their series against the Pens, we said that we were upset that series was a first round series because there's a bit of a rivalry there, and just with the talent on both teams, that should have been a conference semifinal or a conference final. And it was a decent series, kind of the more one of the more maybe a little downplayed series. I mean, there was dirty play, if I remember correctly. So that kind of murked it up a little bit. But I'm excited to see where this Columbus team goes to. It's a team that can give really any roster just fits based on whether it's good offensive prowess or if it's Bob just stealing them a game in the net.
Exactly. And this Columbus team too, Bobrovsky helps big time, but it's not necessarily, it's not like they were generally outplayed last year. You know, most, it's not like they were the Senators who, I mean, they had a great record, but they were actually negative in goal differential. They might have been the only playoff team in the league to do that last year. This Columbus team was good. They were good on both ends of the ice. They earned most of their victories, of course. Bobrovsky, he'll steal you some. And he'll do the same thing this year. That's what you get with an elite goaltender. They steal you some games and you just say, hey, there's a couple more points in the bank. But like you said, I don't think there's any really reason to doubt that maybe they stay the same, but I don't see them getting any worse unless barring, a catastrophic injury.
All right. With our last couple teams, we're going to go at least a little quicker here. We don't have to sprint through our points, but we got about 15 minutes. So we'll move on quickly to the New York Rangers, who were mainly going to talk about the fact that they won the Kevin Shattenkirk lottery here in this past offseason. It was Washington at the trade deadline, but the Rangers lock him down, I forget for how many years. And he'll be a nice stabilizing force on the blue line. But other than that, you have some pieces. I mean, well, you have some guys who are good. You have like Jimmy Vesey, who had a good year. You have guys like Zuccarello, Zibanejad, Kevin Hayes, who does decent for you. You have some guys who are getting up there in age. Guys like Mark Stahl, Ryan McDonough, and despite the fact that Henrik Lundqvist is one of the top goalies in the league, he ain't getting any younger.
No. He isn't getting any younger, and they traded away Antti Ranta this year, this past off, and I wonder about that move. I don't think Henrik Lundqvist had some very shaky moments last year, very shaky, and I'm just skeptical. I look at the Rangers and I say, okay, they traded away Cam Talbot, who's turned himself into a very good goaltender. Now they've traded away Antti Ranta, who last year looked very good. You're banking on Lundqvist, who I think is like 35. Goalies around that age don't typically tend to just keep humming along. And a bad goalie, as I know you can attest in Philadelphia and I can attest in Edmonton, a bad goalie can sink any team. And that's where I'm very cautious about this New York Rangers team. I don't think they do as good as they did last year. Kevin Shattenkirk, to me, isn't enough of a difference maker to overcome that. He's great offensively. Defensively, he has his moments where there is some serious wobble in his defensive game. And if you get a shaky goaltender, and Lundqvist showed last year that he could go on periods where he was very shaky, that's a recipe for disaster. And I'm not saying that the Rangers are going to fall so much that they're going to follow the playoffs. But if they find themselves in a wild card hunt, as we talked about, there's a lot of hungry teams that are going to be fighting for those spots. And when the difference was 1 point between playoffs or not in the East last year, the Rangers could find themselves very well looking in. So I don't know. What do you like?
It's kind of the same vibe. And you mentioned like bad goaltending could sink you. I wouldn't even necessarily say bad. I'll say inconsistent goaltending can sink you. I think that's a bigger tell than like just a bad goaltender. And that part of me is kind of defending that, like, because I like Steve Mason, and when Michael Neuvert is healthy and on, I really like him too. I'll talk about the Flyers more in a couple minutes, but there were just times where they were just inconsistent, and if Lundqvist starts dipping from Hank the Tank goalie to he's sort of elite to he's a little inconsistent, but some games he's on to I don't know which Hank I'm gonna get tonight. Yeah, you're right. You can't bank on that. And it's funny that his past two backups have gone out now, and now they're going to have starting jobs in places. So it's interesting to think, like, what's happening here? Like, our like franchise goaltender who we love here is kind of decreasing. I mean, I have a buddy who's a Rangers fan who it was either before this past season or maybe the season before that was talking about how he thought that that the Rangers should have made a big trade with Dallas, traded Lundqvist there, and got back a couple of their like young prospects to reload. Now, like you start to look back and you wonder, maybe that might have been a good option. And again, he's still a top regarded goaltender, but he's kind of starting to fall.
Yeah, and as we've seen it with the Vancouver Canucks as of recently. An aging team that misses their shot at a cup, and then they hold on to their aging stars, and and what they really do is they stay in the playoffs, maybe not the highest seeds. They stay in there, they stay competitive, but they don't have a team good enough to win the cup, and then they're missing out on higher draft picks. And so the Rangers are almost in that sort of voodoo zone where they're not terrible, but they're not good enough to really pose a threat for the cup. And so that's where it's like, I mean, Lundqvist, he only posted, I'm looking it up right now, a 910 save percentage last year, which compared to his earlier years, that's not good. And no. I just don't think necessarily that that's going to get any better this year. And I don't think that's going to be enough to really keep them in the playoffs. That's what I really think.
It'll be interesting to watch. So real quickly, we'll move on to the Tampa Bay Lightning. And really the main thing I want to talk about here is, it's one player, and that's Steve Stamkos. You talk about the Lightning almost getting into the playoffs last year, beating out Toronto, but for the past couple years, Steve Stamkos is their guy. Of course, was it last year he decided to stay in Tampa? He signed the big extension because he wanted to help that franchise. And then for the second year in a row, another just kind of freak injury that keeps him out for a very good chunk of the season, if not the whole season. I know there's other talent on this team. This team made it to a cup a couple years ago. But this team needs their captain healthy, and they need him at 100%.
Yeah, they do. And that's where I look at last year, and I see that Lightning, they were only 1 point away from the playoffs with Stamkos out for such a big chunk of the year. That right there, that tells me that if Stamkos is healthy, they should be able to make the playoffs. I really think
and get a decent seed too.
And get a decent seed. They did trade away Jonathan Drouin, but in return they got Mikhail Sergachev from the Montreal Canadiens, who was just drafted very high. One of the, I think that was last year's draft. By all accounts, he's had a very strong training camp and looks to probably make the opening night roster for the Lightning. And so it's not, you lose little bit on the front end, but you get a great piece on the back end who should only get better. And again, this team still has Vasilevsky, awesome goalie. They've still got Victor Hedman, one of the best D in the league. And like you said, when they get a healthy Steven Stamkos, you've got one of the premier scoring talents, if not the best scorer in the league right now. If Alex Ovechkin continues to not hit that 50 mark, Steven Stamkos can be. You've shown it in the past. He can be one of your best goal scorers in the league. So they've got talent all over the ice. I don't see them missing the playoffs this year, barring, like we said, another bad injury.
Yeah, so, you hate to put all the focus on, one player, but, with a guy because we've seen how good Steven Stamkos can be when he is healthy. So for him to be out and have those freak injuries that kept him out for the chunks of the past 2 seasons, you can't help but you can't ignore it. You have to look and be like, well, if Stamkos is healthy, this team is a lot better. So we'll see if Stamkos is healthy this year, and if he does, how much of an impact he can still have on his team, because he still wears that seat for that team. And now with our, I know a couple minutes here, my turn to be a homer, and we'll talk about the Philadelphia Flyers. Kind of following the Maple Leafs blueprint from last year, Ron Hextall giving the kids a shot. I mean, the only real big free agent move he made was he signed Brian Elliott to a 2-year deal. I mean, who was basically Western Conference Steve Mason. So, I mean, stopgap, I think, puts it at a minimal. Plus, Michael Neuvirth, when he's healthy, again, he could be very on his game. I was at a Flyers Kings game last year where Neuvirth stood on his head and they lost 1-0 in overtime because Jeff Carter happened to be open in the slot. Whoops. So, so goaltending, all right, yeah, that situation, meh, kind of play it like you see it. But you've got some young, hungry talent, especially on defense. But so you start with, I mean, Ivan Provorov coming off a great rookie year last year. If it wasn't for some of the studs from the Leafs and guys like Austin Line, he might have gotten at least some love for the Calder, maybe a little bit. He wasn't going to win it, but then you got guys like Sam Morin, Robert Haig, who got some taste of the NHL last year, but they're here and they've been having pretty decent camps. Travis Sondheim, who the Flyers just played a home-and-home series with the Rangers, and Sondheim basically took those 2 games to be like, okay, hey, I'm here. And it was funny. Someone actually posted the other night he scored 2 goals in the game against Henrik Lundqvist. Someone shared on Twitter the only other Flyer to score 2 goals on Henrik Lundqvist, I don't know if this was in a game or whatever, was Mark Recchi, way back like early 2000s. So I'm like, oh, all right. So, I mean, if you're scoring twice on, even if it is a declining Henrik Lundqvist, you're doing something right. Basically, what I'm saying about this young, hungry defense core is hopefully they're playing Andrew McDonald off this roster. It's. But then, looking up to the offensive zone, you've got Travis Konechny, who had a stellar game last night, scored the game winner against the Rangers. And, oh, yeah, you have the number 2 overall pick in Nolan Patrick, too, who, if the Flyers keep Giroux at wing, which they've been toying with a little bit, you have to keep Nolan Patrick on this team because at that point, he has to be your number 2 center with Couturier at number 1. I'm not getting ahead of myself and saying, oh, they're going to have a season like the Leafs did last year. That's going to remain to be seen. But I am very excited at the fact that there is a lot of young talent here to watch, similar to in Toronto last year. And if that talent can gel together with a veteran core of Giroux, Voracek, and Simmons, if that all blends together, something good can happen. At least that's what I'm hoping.
Yeah, I would think that that's a very reasonable thing to hope for. 2 years ago, Flyers have that excellent year. Gostisbehere had that incredible rookie year. And I think last year we really thought that was going to continue. And of course, one thing led to another. And, a disappointing season in terms of a step back. But like you mentioned, they get Nolan Patrick. That's a big talent, big get to luckily be able to move up and draft him. I personally like the idea of Claude Giroux on the wing. I think at this point, coming off a 14-goal season where you got to see more than that from Giroux. He's always been more of a playmaker than a goal scorer, but you need more than 14 goals from that guy. And if moving him to the wing helps reinvigorate his offensive sort of instincts and drive, well, then maybe you do it. I still really like Gostisbehere in your guys' lineup. I love Gostisbehere. He's going to have to tighten up the defensive game. That last year he struggled a bit with that. I'm sure you can attest to that, where he probably had some crazy moments of wobble. But there's a lot of young talent on the Flyers, a lot of really good young talent. And like you said, you got a good veteran core there. So when you can combine those two, good things can happen. Is it banking a little bit on, more than you'd like on the youth? Maybe, but hey, Toronto did it last year, like you said. So who knows? But either way, the future's looking good in Philadelphia.
Yeah, and you're right. Maybe that is a little quote unquote too much pressure on the young guys, but I mean, you got to see where the high expectations come from. Because I mean, hell, like one of the best players in the world right now plays for Edmonton, and oh yeah, he's 20 years old. You know what I mean?
Exactly. It's the league every year for the past probably 4 years, maybe since the last lockout, it's getting younger. It's gearing towards actually one of the facts I read today on Twitter was that this might be the first season in NHL history where the majority of the players or the majority of games played in the NHL will be played by players that are actually under 27 or 27 and under. That's insane. We're a long ways away from the Detroit years of old, of early 2000s, where your 30-year-olds and your 31-year-olds, you had your old veterans that dominated the league, the clutch and grab era. We're a long way from that. It's a speedy game. Youth is ruling. It's the youth movement. And hey, your Philadelphia Flyers, you've got a lot of youth and a lot of talented youth.
Well, and we're hoping it all pans out. And by the way, like, just to kind of close out before we say our goodbyes, like, the youth movement in this league, that's a good thing. That is such a good thing. The youth movement combined with 3-on-3 overtimes. I know some of the players aren't exactly fans of it, but it's entertaining to see those guys in the big NHL ring just flying around, making it look effortless, and just all just trying to capitalize on those speedy chances. And there are a lot of speedy chances, especially with the game getting younger and with 3-on-3 overtime. That's what fans like to see. So I'm glad that that's being kind of embraced more and more in the NHL, because it makes the game of hockey fun. And that's why guys like us love it. And that's why really it should have more of a broader audience. So basically what I'm saying is I'm excited for this season. Obviously, we're both excited for our teams, but it's always cool to see what stories, what narratives get written for certain players and certain teams.
Exactly. And if this year league wide is that continuing youth movement, that continuing speed, that continuing skill focused on the NHL, like you said, that is a good thing. No one wants to return to the 2002 New Jersey Devils trap game where they win every game 2-1 or 1-0, and you just want to pull your hair out. No one wants that. We want speed. We want energy. Call those penalties. No more hooking, no more grabbing, no more clutching. Let these players play. Let them showcase their skill, and that makes it better for everyone in the long run.
All right, so I'm excited for this hockey season, and I know you are too. So, Brett, thank you so much for joining us. Look at that. We're ending right on time. How about that?
Perfectly scheduled. Look at that. We are terrific.
Awesome. So, all right. So, I'm sure, I don't know if we'll do like monthly things, but maybe like at some point we'll do like some sort of like recap. I mean, probably around like mid-season we could do something too. So, we'll figure that out along with Matt Meffy along the way. But so for Brett, I'm Tyler for Unlimited. Thanks a lot, guys. Enjoy the hockey season.